The warship moved like a black blade through the cold stars, silent and dangerous. Its dark hull cut across the void as if it belonged to the night itself. Inside the command chamber, alien officers whispered in low, shaky voices. They sat around a glowing table, their faces pale under the cold blue light. Every screen in the room showed the same word, pulsing in red like a wound: Deathworlder. No one dared to say the name too loud. Fear was heavy in the air. One officer leaned closer to another, his voice trembling. They say one Deathworlder destroyed a fleet of 50 ships alone. The other shook his head. No, that's just a story, he whispered. But his eyes betrayed the lie. Everyone had heard the stories. A creature from a world too harsh for other life. A being raised where even the air wanted to kill. A human. In the corner of the room, a quiet figure sat with his head lowered. He wore a plain uniform of a neutral colony. No weapons, no rank, no reason to be noticed. The aliens saw him but did not look twice. He was just another envoy. Harmless, silent, but behind that calm face, his heart beat steady and cold. He heard every word, watched every movement. He was the one they feared and they didn't even know. A tall alien commander slammed his hands on the table. We must find it before it finds us, he hissed. If the Deathworlder is on board, none of us will survive, another officer barked. Security is already searching every level. Their voices grew louder, panic creeping into every word. The quiet envoy raised his eyes just enough to see the flicker of fear in their faces. He knew fear well. Fear made them weak. Blind, predictable, a soldier rushed in, his breath short. Commander, the scanners found nothing, he said. No heat signatures. No unusual readings, the commander growled. Then it's hiding. He didn't know how right he was. The envoy watched, unmoving. His training taught him to disappear in plain sight. No cloaks, no magic, just stillness, just patience. As the warship glided closer to the red moon, the atmosphere thickened. The aliens talked about what the Deathworlder could do, how they would trap it, how they would kill it. But every plan they made, every word they spoke, reached the ears of the very thing they feared. The envoy's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like a shadow of one. He whispered to himself, "You're already too late." In the dim corridor outside the chamber, the lights flickered. Soldiers moved in squads, their weapons tight in their hands. "Stay alert," one of them barked. "The Deathworlder can look like anything." They checked corners, vents, storage rooms. They didn't check the quiet man who passed them with a nod. A friendly face, a harmless presence, that was his strength. Humans didn't need to hide in darkness. They hid in sight. The commander ordered the doors sealed. "Nothing leaves this ship until we find it," he declared. But deep in the control system, quiet fingers moved. The envoy's wrist device linked to their network in silence. One by one, locks changed, corridors shifted, pathways opened. He had been inside their system long before they noticed. In the cafeteria, a young alien soldier whispered, "What if it's sitting right next to us?" His friend laughed nervously. "Then we're already dead," he said. The envoy sat 2 tables away, stirring his drink, listening to their laughter that wasn't real laughter. It was the sound of fear trying to wear a mask. Minutes passed like hours. A silent storm built inside the ship. Tension climbed higher. The alien leaders began to argue. "Blame point fingers," they shouted at their security teams. Demanding results, one voice rose above the others. "What if it's not hiding in the shadows?" Silence followed, one by one. They looked around the room. For the first time, they noticed the quiet envoy sitting in the corner. His gaze met the commander's, calm and steady. The commander narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" he demanded. The envoy tilted his head. "Just an observer," he said softly. His voice was too calm for the storm around him, too sure for someone who should have been afraid. The commander's hand moved slowly toward his weapon. The room fell into a quiet that felt heavier than sound. A low alarm echoed through the deck, not from the control room, but from the ship's core. One officer screamed, "The engine's overheating!" Another shouted, "We're locked out of the system." Panic cracked through their discipline. The envoy stood, moving with the calm of a man walking through rain. Not war, every screen lit up with human code, lines the aliens could not understand. "Stop him!" the commander roared. But the soldiers hesitated. They saw it in his eyes. That cold, sharp, patient look, that wasn't the face of a neutral envoy. That was the face from the stories whispered in dark rooms. A Deathworlder. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just spoke clearly. "You spent the whole night hunting a ghost," he said. But the ghost was never hiding. His words hit them harder than any weapon. The commander fired, but the lights went out first. Darkness swallowed the chamber. In that darkness, they heard nothing but footsteps, slow and steady. When the lights came back, the commander's weapon was on the floor. His soldiers were pinned by their own defense systems. The envoy stood at the center of the room, his mask of neutrality gone, behind his calm smile. There was something much older and more dangerous. "You were looking for a monster," he whispered. "But the monster was sitting right next to you." Outside the warship, the red moon glowed brighter as power from the alien vessel redirected. He had turned their fear into a weapon. He walked out of the chamber, the doors sealing behind him. The alarm still screamed, but it didn't matter anymore. By the time they understood what had happened, the Deathworlder was gone, leaving only silence. And in that silence, fear remained. Sharper than any blade, the warship floated in orbit, silent like a beast waiting to strike, but inside, chaos spread through every corridor. Soldiers shouted over their radios. Officers ran between control rooms, and security teams doubled their patrols. They thought they were closing in on the Deathworlder, but they were chasing shadows. Every camera feed showed nothing. Every scanner returned clean, and yet everyone could feel it. Something was there. Something was watching them. The commander stood at the center of the bridge, his jaw tight. His second-in-command stepped closer and whispered, "We should contact the council." The commander shook his head sharply. "No, if they know we lost control, we're finished." His eyes scanned the room, landing on faces that tried to look brave, but were shaking inside. He slammed his hand on the table. "Find it," he growled. "I don't care how, just find it." In the lower deck, the quiet envoy moved through the shadows like a ghost. He walked past security checkpoints, nodded at guards, and passed through locked doors without making a sound. The ship's security was built to stop soldiers, not someone who already owned their systems. His wrist device glowed faintly, each flicker unlocking a door, rerouting a camera, or silencing an alarm. He wasn't running, he was walking slowly, like a man who already knew the ending. Two alien guards turned a corner and froze when they saw him. One barked, "Identify yourself." The envoy smiled faintly and lifted his hands. "Envoy," he said softly, "lost on the lower decks." They stared at him, scanning his badge. It matched perfectly. They let him pass, not knowing their systems were lying to them. Behind him, in the command room, officers studied the ship's schematics. "It doesn't make sense," one of them whispered. "No readings, no signatures, no movement." Another officer slammed a hand on the console. "Then why are systems failing one by one?" Screens blinked. One sector after another, the map of their warship began to go dark. "It's inside," someone muttered. "It's inside, and we can't even see it." In the mess hall, a group of soldiers sat together whispering. One of them said, "I heard Deathworlders can control machines with their minds." Another laughed nervously. "No, they say they can kill a man with a look." Their laughter didn't last. It sounded forced, brittle. Every creak of the ship made them flinch. None of them noticed the envoy, sitting 3 tables away, listening to every word, sipping a drink as if he didn't have the whole ship in the palm of his hand. He left the hall quietly, leaving no trace. As he walked through the engineering deck, the hum of the engines filled the air. Sparks danced in the distance where maintenance drones worked. He knelt near a control panel and pressed his hand against it. The hidden link between his device and the ship's core activated. Codes flickered silently across unseen channels. Systems meant to protect the ship now followed his orders. An engineer turned the corner and gasped when she saw him. "Hey, you can't be here," she said. Stepping forward, he turned slowly, his calm smile never fading. "I got lost," he said. She frowned. "This area is restricted." She reached for her comm, but the lights around them flickered. The entire deck went dark for 3 seconds. When the lights returned, she was lying unconscious on the floor. He hadn't said a word, he hadn't even moved fast, but she was no longer a problem. Meanwhile, in the command room, alarms screamed. "Engineering deck compromised," an officer shouted. "Multiple systems offline." The commander's voice was sharp like a blade. "Lock it down." "But the doors didn't lock, sir," another officer stammered. "Someone is overriding the security from inside." Panic ran through the crew like cold water. The commander's hands tightened into fists. "It's playing with us," he whispered. The envoy walked deeper into the engine core, where the heart of the ship pulsed like a living creature. One wrong move here and the whole warship would be nothing but dust in the void. He didn't need to destroy it. He just needed to remind them how fragile they really were. He whispered softly to himself, "They called me a monster." His hand brushed over a glowing conduit. "Let's give them something to fear." Back on the bridge, the commander barked orders. "Seal all decks, arm every soldier, and bring the heavy squads to engineering." The soldiers moved fast, boots pounding against metal floors, but they were chasing a ghost that already knew where they were. The envoy walked through the engine corridors with the ease of someone walking home. Every step he took shut down another system. The first squad arrived at engineering. They spread out, weapons raised, scanning every shadow. One soldier whispered, "Do you feel that?" The air was colder, heavier. The lights above them flickered and died, leaving only red emergency glow. Then they heard it, a slow, calm voice behind them. "You shouldn't have come here." They spun around. Weapons aimed, but it was too late. The lights came back on for a second, and the envoy stood in the middle of the room. No fear, no rush, just stillness. One soldier fired, but the bullet never reached him. The defense systems activated on his command. Energy barriers rose around him like invisible walls, and the shot ricocheted back into the ceiling. Panic broke the squad. "He's controlling the ship," one shouted. Another ran toward the exit, but the doors locked with a hiss. The envoy walked forward, his eyes cold but calm. "You hunt monsters," he said softly, "but you forgot one thing." His voice echoed against the metal walls. "Monsters don't hide in the dark." He pointed upward at the ship. "They stand in the light." The commander's voice cracked through the radio. "Shoot him!" But no one did. They could feel it, the way the air changed. The way the ship seemed to breathe with him. They weren't facing a man. They were facing the very thing they feared in their stories. A Deathworlder who moved like a storm they couldn't stop. Then suddenly the alarms stopped. The red lights faded into calm white. The envoy raised a hand, and the ship obeyed. Every door unlocked, every weapon control turned off. Every defense system bent to his will. "I told you," he whispered. "You were already too late." The commander slammed his fist on the console, shouting into the comm, "Who are you?" His voice echoed through every speaker on the ship. The envoy stood in the engine core, looking up at the glowing heart of the vessel. He spoke slowly, clearly, his voice filling every room. "I am what you fear," he said. "I am what you made me." The soldiers lowered their weapons one by one, not out of mercy, but because they knew it didn't matter anymore. Control of the ship was no longer theirs. The Deathworlder had taken it without a battle. Just quiet steps, cold patience, and the fear they had built themselves. And somewhere deep in the stars, far from this place, Earth waited silently. Ready for the war these aliens had just lost before it even began. The ship drifted through the dark void like a wounded animal. Engines alive but under someone else's control. Every light burned a cold white. Every console was silent. And every soldier on board knew something had shifted. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were trapped inside their own warship with a Deathworlder holding the strings. Fear filled every hallway like smoke, thick and hard to breathe. The commander stood at the center of the bridge with clenched fists. His officers avoided his eyes. Their hands shook on their controls, and their voices were no longer sharp, only cracked. "Sir," one of them whispered. "He has access to everything." The commander's jaw tightened. "Not everything," he hissed. His voice was steady, but his eyes told the truth. He was scared, deeply scared. He had faced many enemies, but not like this. Not something that could vanish into their ship and turn it into a weapon. Somewhere below them, the Deathworlder moved like a shadow. His steps were soft, quiet, like he belonged here. He walked through corridors he had already memorized, passing soldiers who didn't even know they were surrounded. Every camera, every defense turret, every door. It all bent to his will with a single gesture. He didn't need to fight them. He just needed them to keep being afraid, and they were. A voice cracked through the ship's intercom, one of the young soldiers whispering to another. Unaware it was picked up by an open channel. "Do you think he's even human?" The reply came shaky. "I don't know. Maybe he's something worse." Those words traveled fast, echoing in rooms they never meant to reach. The Deathworlder heard it too, and it almost made him laugh. He didn't need them to believe he was a monster. They were doing that part for him. On the bridge, the commander leaned forward. "We need to take back control," he said. "What about the manual override?" An officer asked. He nodded sharply. "We cut him off from the ship, seal him in, and burn him out." Their plan sounded bold, but everyone in the room knew it was desperate. Still, desperate was all they had left. The lower decks filled with the echo of soldiers moving in groups. They carried heavy weapons, their boots pounding on the steel floor. Each of them had been ordered to lock down the engine room, one whispered. "I heard he took down an entire fleet alone," another hissed. "Shut up," but his hands were shaking too. Their voices betrayed the truth their weapons couldn't hide. The Deathworlder stopped in a long hallway lined with glowing panels. He tilted his head, listening to their boots above. He didn't run, he didn't even hide. He reached for a panel, his fingers brushing over the surface. And with one silent command, the hallway shifted. Doors closed, lights dimmed, and pathways changed. The soldiers above didn't know their route was already gone. The commander barked through his comm. "Team Bravo, move into Sector 9, Static answered him. "Bravo, report." More static, his eyes darkened. "He's cutting our lines," an officer whispered. The commander slammed his fist on the console. "He's not a god. He's just one man," he growled. But his own voice didn't sound sure anymore, down below. The first squad finally reached the engine sector. Their leader raised a hand, signaling silence. They entered slowly, step by step, guns up, nerves tight. The sound of the engines filled the room like a heartbeat, strong and steady. They spread out, eyes scanning every shadow. "Where is he?" one whispered. A soft voice answered from behind them. "Right here." They turned at once, but the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed them whole. Someone screamed, a shot echoed, and then silence returned. One of the soldiers managed to switch on a small lamp. It flickered weakly, lighting only the floor. Their squad leader was gone. The lamp shook in the soldier's hand. "We need backup," he shouted into his radio. "He's here, on the bridge." Alarms flashed red again. "Sector 9, squad down," someone yelled. "He's picking us off." The commander's chest burned with rage and fear. "Get me every man on this ship," he roared. "We end this now." The Deathworlder moved through the fallen soldiers like a shadow slipping through mist. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. They were unconscious, alive but terrified. It was enough. His goal wasn't to kill them, not yet. Fear was sharper than bullets. He let their panic grow like fire. He walked into the ship's secondary control hub, a small room that could override the main bridge. A perfect weak point. He placed his hand on the console, and the screens came alive at his touch. Codes danced across the display. Human code. The kind the aliens didn't understand, he whispered softly. "Let's turn your cage into mine." The bridge screens flickered. Alarms cut out, replaced by a voice they didn't expect. A calm, human voice. "This ship belongs to me now." His words slid through every speaker like a blade. The commander froze. The crew stopped breathing. "You've made a mistake," the commander shouted. "You can't hold this ship forever." A soft laugh echoed back. "Forever?" The voice said, "I don't need forever." Then the lights dimmed, and the ship's engines changed course. Not toward their fleet, not toward safety, but straight toward a dead zone of space. The commander shouted orders, but none of the systems responded. He was locked out completely in the lower decks. Soldiers ran in panic, trying to regroup, but every hallway shifted against them. The Deathworlder turned their warship into a maze. His voice followed them, calm and cold. "You wanted to hunt a Deathworlder," he said, "but tell me, what happens when the hunter becomes the prey?" The commander's second-in-command stepped close, her voice shaking. "Sir, he's herding us," she whispered. "He's not fighting us." The commander stared at the navigation screen. Realizing she was right, the ship's movements were too controlled, too clean. He wasn't destroying them. He was pushing them somewhere. A sudden silence filled the ship. No alarms, no flickering lights, nothing, just quiet. That kind of quiet made the crew's skin crawl. It meant he didn't need to push anymore. He had already won this round. The commander stood tall, forcing the fear out of his voice. "Listen to me," he said into the comm. "We will fight him. We will not let one man break us." But even as he spoke, the lights on the bridge dimmed again, and the voice came through the speaker, softer than before. "You already broke yourselves." Far below, the Deathworlder stared at the star map projected on the console. The ship now moved under his control. He didn't want their lives, not yet. He wanted their fear to spread. He wanted every alien who whispered about Deathworlders to remember this day. He leaned closer to the console and whispered, "The hunt isn't over." His voice slid through the ship like a chill wind, and up on the bridge, even the commander, who had sworn he would never fear, felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The warship floated deep inside the dead zone of space, far from any star or signal outside. The void was endless and silent. Inside, the silence was worse. It was not the quiet of peace, but the quiet before something strikes. The crew felt it like a weight pressing on their lungs. The air itself seemed heavier. Every step echoed too loud in the empty corridors. The commander stood on the bridge, his face pale but hard. His officers whispered, their eyes flicking nervously to the door, as if expecting the Deathworlder to appear at any second. One officer finally broke the silence. "Sir, we are no longer moving." The commander didn't answer right away. He stared at the dark screen where navigation should have been. Everything was locked. The ship was under someone else's hand, not theirs. "He's playing with us," the commander muttered. His voice was low, sharp, like broken glass. "He could have killed us all already," another officer whispered. "But he hasn't." The words hung in the air like a shadow. That was the worst part. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't attacking in a storm. He was calm, patient. He wanted them to feel it. Down in the lower decks, the Deathworlder moved through the dark corridors with steady steps. No one tried to stop him anymore, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know where he was. He moved like he belonged to the ship more than they did. His hands brushed against the walls, tracing the pulse of their systems like veins. He whispered softly, "Almost time." The engineering team was huddled together near the core room, their weapons shaking in their hands. One of them whispered, "He could be anywhere," another answered. "He is everywhere." They weren't wrong. The lights flickered, as if the ship itself was listening to their fear. A young engineer leaned closer to the control panel. "Sir, he's rerouted the energy flow again," she whispered. "He's moving the power toward the main communication array." The chief engineer froze. "Why communications?" He whispered back on the bridge. Alarms flashed again. "He's trying to open the long-range transmitters," an officer shouted. "If he sends a signal out..." The commander cut him off sharply. "He won't," but even as he said the words, he wasn't sure. He slammed his hand on the console. "Reroute all power from communications," but their hands shook when they saw the response. The ship refused the command. "He already locked us out," the officer stammered. The commander's chest burned with helpless rage. "He's not just controlling this ship," he whispered. "He's using it." The Deathworlder stood before the main communication tower, wires and glowing panels around him. He moved like a man who had built the ship himself. His hands danced across the controls. The alien system shifted into human code. Lines of text the crew couldn't read. The soft hum of the transmitters filled the air. He raised his head and whispered, They'll hear this. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from behind him. A squad of soldiers appeared, trembling but armed. Their leader pointed his rifle and shouted, "Step away!" His voice cracked on the last word. The Deathworlder didn't even turn. "You shouldn't have come here," he said softly. One soldier flinched. "Shoot him!" the leader barked. They fired. But the shots curved against the defense field he had prepared. Energy shields shimmered like a quiet wave. Every bullet was useless. He turned slowly, his eyes calm. "I'm not here to kill you," he said, "but if you force me, I will not hesitate." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the entire deck, making every soldier take a step back without even realizing it. One young soldier screamed and charged forward, trying to be brave. The Deathworlder moved faster than their eyes could follow. One step, one strike, and the soldier was on the floor. Breathing but out cold, the rest froze in place, staring at him like they were staring at something they couldn't understand. "Go," he said quietly. "You have 10 seconds." No one waited to count. They ran, stumbling over each other, leaving their fallen comrade behind. The Deathworlder turned back to the control panel and finished what he started. The transmitters came alive, stretching their reach far beyond the dead zone. A signal raced into the black, silent but sharp on the bridge. The commander's eyes widened. He sent something. To who? An officer shouted, "We're in a dead zone. Who can hear it?" The commander's voice was grim. Someone who was waiting. The alien officers scrambled at their controls, trying to track the signal, but they couldn't. It didn't follow their channels. It was human code, old and dangerous, a language made for war. The commander grabbed the comm device, shouting into the ship, "What do you want?" For a moment there was no answer. Then the speakers filled with a low, calm human voice. "I want you to remember." The entire bridge froze. "Remember what?" the commander shouted. The voice came again, quiet but sharp. "The day a Deathworlder sat among you, and you didn't even see him." Alarms screamed again as the ship's navigation changed course. The engines roared to life, pulling the vessel toward an unknown point in space. "Where is he taking us?" an officer cried. The commander's voice cracked. "Not us," he whispered. "He's bringing someone here down below." The Deathworlder watched the coordinates lock in place. A faint blue light blinked on the panel, signaling that the reply had been received. They were coming. He leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing slowly. His mission was never to destroy the ship. It was to make sure no one would ever doubt the legends again. On the bridge, the officers were panicking, shouting over each other, "We need to stop him! We can't! We have to! He'll bring death here!" The commander slammed his hand down and barked. "Silence." His eyes burned with anger. "He wants us afraid," he said. "Then we give him something else." He grabbed his weapon and started walking toward the door. The second in command called out, "Sir, you can't go down there alone." He didn't stop. Someone has to face him. The corridors were empty when the commander reached the communication deck. Only the humming of the ship filled the air. Then he saw him, standing by the panel like a ghost in human skin. The commander raised his weapon. "It ends now." The Deathworlder looked at him without fear. "No," he said softly. "It begins now." The commander fired, but the bullet never hit. The ship itself bent to the Deathworlder's will. The walls shifted, locking the commander out of the room. He pounded on the door, shouting, "You'll bring war upon us!" The voice that answered him was quiet, but it cut deeper than any blade. War was already coming, in the darkness of the void. Far away, something moved, a reply to the signal, a fleet. And aboard the alien warship, fear turned into a storm that none of them could control anymore. The ship floated in the silent void like a trap waiting to spring. The signal had been sent, and the crew could feel the storm coming closer with every passing second. The lights flickered across the decks, the engines hummed under someone else's control, and no one dared to speak too loud. Fear had turned into something heavier now. It was no longer about catching the Deathworlder. It was about surviving whatever was about to arrive. The commander paced across the bridge, his face pale but hard like carved stone. "How long until something answers that signal?" he barked. A trembling officer replied, "We don't know, sir, but the signal is still active. It didn't just call someone, it gave them our exact coordinates. The commander clenched his fists. Then we prepare. In the lower decks, the Deathworlder stood near the communication tower, his eyes fixed on the blinking blue light. It wasn't just a signal, it was a promise that everything these aliens whispered about humans would no longer be a story. His voice was calm, almost quiet. "They'll be here soon," he whispered to himself. Above him, squads of soldiers gathered with heavy weapons. They were scared, but they needed something to do. One soldier said, "Do you really think he called his people?" Another answered, "I don't think—" "I know," their commander shouted. "Keep the formation if he tries anything." We hit him with everything we've got, but deep inside, they all knew their weapons wouldn't matter. He wasn't fighting them with brute strength, he was breaking them with fear. The ship's sensors suddenly lit up with a faint reading. "Sir," an officer whispered, "something is coming out of the dead zone." The commander froze. Leaning over the display, a massive shadow emerged from the dark. Growing larger with every second, it wasn't a single ship, it was a fleet. Hundreds of vessels moving in perfect silence. No broadcasts, no warnings, just cold precision. The bridge filled with whispers. "Is that them? Humans? Are we going to die?" The commander slammed his hand down. "Quiet!" His voice cracked through their panic. "We don't panic." But even as he said it, his heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He turned to his second in command. "We have to stop him," she whispered. "Can we?" The Deathworlder didn't flinch when the alarm screamed across the ship. He looked at the black void through the viewport. The human fleet was approaching, their formation like a dark wave against the stars. He whispered softly. Right on time, a group of alien soldiers burst into the room. Guns raised. "Get away from the controls," their leader shouted. The Deathworlder turned slowly, his face calm. "You should run," he said. His voice was soft but sharp. "This isn't a fight you can win." The soldiers hesitated, one shouting, "You called them here, didn't you?" He gave a faint smile. "I didn't call them," he said. "I warned them." Before they could react, the floor under their feet shook. The massive fleet had locked onto the alien warship, not with weapons but with something worse, control. Human ships didn't need permission to take over. They spoke a language the alien systems didn't understand but feared. One by one, every system on the alien warship fell silent. On the bridge, panic exploded. "Sir, we're losing control. Weapons are offline, shields not responding, engines locked." The commander stared at the screen as the words, "System overridden," flashed over and over. "They're inside everything," one officer gasped. The Deathworlder walked through the communication deck like a man who had already won. He didn't even have to fight them anymore. The fear he planted had done its job. He stepped into the lift and made his way toward the bridge. Every door opened for him. Every guard who saw him stepped back without lifting a weapon. The commander turned when the doors opened. His hand tightened around his sidearm. "You!" he hissed. "You brought them here." The Deathworlder stopped at the entrance. "No," he said quietly. "You brought this on yourselves." The commander raised his gun, his hands shaking. "You've doomed us." The Deathworlder took another step. "You doomed yourselves the moment you called Earth weak." Outside the windows, the human fleet moved closer, silent and massive. Like a predator circling its prey, the commander shouted, "If they fire, they'll kill us all." The Deathworlder's calm expression didn't change. "Then maybe you should pray they don't," he said softly. An officer screamed, "They're hacking our main core." The lights flickered and a deep voice filled the ship. Not the Deathworlder's, but something colder. "You have violated Terran space." The commander's mouth went dry. "Terran space?" he whispered. "We're nowhere near Earth," the voice continued. "We warned you once." The Deathworlder stepped closer to the commander. "You thought you were hunters," he said. "You thought Deathworlders were just stories. But now you understand." He leaned forward, his voice low. "The stories were the soft version." The alien crew watched in silence as the fleet surrounded them. A single Terran battleship powered up its main cannon, the blue energy humming like a storm. One officer fell to his knees. "We're finished," he whispered. But the Deathworlder raised his hand slightly, and the cannon stopped charging. The Terran voice returned. "Stand down, Commander." A second later, the screen on the bridge lit up with the face of a Terran admiral. "Cold and stern, extraction complete," the admiral said. "Prepare the package." The aliens stared at the Deathworlder, realizing for the first time he wasn't just a soldier. He was something else, an infiltrator, a weapon wrapped in a quiet face. The commander's voice cracked. "You planned this from the beginning?" The Deathworlder nodded. Every second, the human fleet transmitted one final message. "Remember this night," the admiral said. "We came not to destroy, but to remind you." The fleet began to turn. Dragging the alien warship like a child's toy caught in a net, the commander lowered his weapon, his voice shaking. "What happens to us now?" The Deathworlder walked past him, calm and silent. "That depends," he said, "on whether you learn." As the warship vanished into the black with the human fleet, the crew finally understood the truth of the word Deathworlder. It wasn't about strength or weapons. It was about control, patience, and the quiet terror of realizing the monster they feared had never needed to roar. He had been sitting among them the entire time, smiling in silence. The human fleet surrounded the alien warship like a silent wall of steel. Massive vessels drifted through the void with quiet precision. Their dark hulls reflected no light. Their engines whispered like a storm held on a leash. On the bridge, the alien crew sat frozen. Their ship had been stripped of control. Every weapon silenced, every engine locked. Their fate now rested in hands they once called monsters. The commander gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. His voice shook but carried through the silence. "What do they want with us?" one officer whispered back. "Maybe to make an example." Their whispers died when the screens lit up again. A human face appeared, cold and steady. It was the admiral. "You trespassed into Terran space," the admiral said. His tone was calm, almost too calm. It wasn't the voice of someone celebrating victory. It was the voice of someone stating a fact. "Your ship will be escorted to a neutral zone." No one on the bridge moved, not even to breathe. Behind them, the Deathworlder stood like a shadow, silent but impossible to ignore. He no longer hid behind a false name or calm mask. His very presence filled the room with a pressure none of them could explain. The commander turned slowly toward him. "You," he hissed. "You brought us here?" The Deathworlder tilted his head slightly. "No," he said softly. "You sailed here on your own." The fleet outside shifted position. Every alien on the bridge felt the movement through the floor beneath them. It wasn't just ships, it was power. Power so controlled it didn't need to shout, one officer whispered. "Why don't they fire?" the Deathworlder answered quietly. "Because they don't need to." The commander slammed his hand against the console, anger mixing with fear. "Why?" he demanded. "Why not just kill us?" The Deathworlder's eyes met his. "Oh, calm as ever." "Because death is too easy," he said. His voice was a soft blade. "Fear lasts longer." Far out in the dark, Terran drones moved like shadows. They attached themselves to the alien warship without a sound. One by one they began stripping away data, recording every code, every signal. The aliens didn't even have the power to fight back. The Admiral's face remained on the screen. "You will return home," he said. "But you will not forget," the commander shouted. "We will tell the Council. They will come for you." The Deathworlder stepped forward and spoke before the Admiral could. "Good," he said. "Then the galaxy will finally remember why they fear us." A young alien officer whispered to her commander. He's not just a soldier." Her hands were shaking. "He's a weapon." The commander couldn't argue. He saw it in the way the humans moved, the way the Deathworlder stood. They weren't fighting to win. They had already won. This was something else, something bigger. The ship began to move again, not under alien control, but dragged by the Terran fleet. It was like being pulled through the void by a force too big to fight. The lights on the bridge dimmed. The Deathworlder walked toward the viewing panel, his steps calm and steady. The stars slid past them like streaks of white fire. "Where are they taking us?" one of the officers whispered. "Neutral zone." Another said, To let us live. Their words sounded hollow even to their own ears. The Deathworlder turned his head slightly, his voice low. To let you remember, the commander stepped forward. What happens when they let us go? The Deathworlder smiled faintly. Then you'll tell your council what you saw, he said, and you'll make sure they never forget what happens when they poke a sleeping world. The fleet shifted again, and a Terran broadcast filled the bridge. It was a single, cold message repeated in every alien language. You entered Terran territory uninvited, the voice said. You left alive only because we allowed it? Do not mistake silence for weakness. The alien crew stared at the words, unable to look away. They had grown up hearing stories about humans, dangerous, unpredictable, unstoppable, but they never truly believed. Now those stories stood in front of them, wearing a human face. The commander's voice dropped to a whisper. What are you? The Deathworlder turned to face him fully. I'm exactly what your stories warned you about, he said. And you should have listened. Hours passed like slow drops of water. The alien warship drifted with the human fleet until the stars changed. They entered a quiet system marked as neutral territory. The Terran fleet stopped, engines humming softly like predators resting after a hunt. The Admiral's voice came through once more. This is where we part ways, the commander shouted. Why let us live? The Admiral's cold eyes stared through the screen. Because your fear is worth more than your lives. The transmission ended. One by one, the Terran ships began to disappear into the void, their engines leaving only silence behind. The alien warship floated alone again. Engines and controls slowly returned, like chains being removed after a long captivity. No one on the bridge celebrated, no one cheered. They only sat there. Breathing shallow and trembling, the commander slowly lowered himself into his chair. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They didn't even need to fire." The officers exchanged quiet looks. The fear had sunk deep into their bones. They now understood the power of a Deathworlder. It wasn't in brute force. It was in making you believe they could end you at any second, and choosing not to. The Deathworlder stood near the exit, ready to leave. The commander turned to him, voice low. Why spare us? The Deathworlder paused, his expression calm but sharp. Because the message is louder this way, he said. They'll never fear a gunshot the way they'll fear silence. He walked down the corridor as the alien crew watched. No one moved to stop him, no one even lifted a weapon. He reached the docking bay where a Terran shuttle waited. The doors opened for him without a sound. As he stepped inside, the commander's voice echoed weakly behind him. You think this fear will last forever? The Deathworlder didn't turn around. Yes, he said, because it's the kind that grows. The shuttle door closed with a hiss. The alien crew watched from the viewing panel as the Terran shuttle disappeared into the black sea of stars. The bridge was silent for a long time. The commander stared at the space where the fleet had been. He didn't need an army, he whispered. He was the army, and somewhere far beyond the stars, the Terrans returned home, silent and patient as always. Their enemies told their stories for them, and the legend of the Deathworlder grew stronger, carried on frightened whispers across the galaxy.